This session we're playing 5-10. I buy in for 1,500, which is the max. I take my seat, and the very first hand we get, well, you know. We're playing 8-handed. Under the gun opens to 30. Under the gun +1 calls. 3-betting or calling both seem reasonable. I call. The big blind calls. We go 4 ways to the flop. It comes King 7-5 with 2 spades. The big blind checks. Under the gun pre-flop raiser checks. He's the person that I was most concerned about, but it appears that he doesn't have much. Under the gun +1 checks. It's extremely unlikely that he's going to have a hand better than mine. I'm probably best, and there won't be many turn cards that I like, so I bet 60 for value and to clear out any equity that my opponents may have. The big blind folds. Under the gun folds. Under the gun +1 thinks that I might be trying to steal it. He calls to keep me honest. We're heads up. Again, I'm not very concerned that he has a strong hand, otherwise he would have bet flop himself. The turn is an 8. Under the gun +1 checks. This is a rare spot in which I go for another suite of value, second pair, because I get the sense that I'm getting looked up light by a weaker pair or a draw of some sort. I bet 110. The player is not going away that easily. He calls pretty quickly. The river is the 3 of diamonds. The opponent checks. If he has a misdraw, he's not going to be calling anything. If he has a pair worse than mine, he may not call a third bet either. I'm content to check back. The player says that he has a pair, and reveals that he has Ace-7 offsuit. Good news for us because we can beat that. Right away, the session gets off to a great start. We're up over 250 after the first hand. I add on once I get in the main game where I pick up pocket jigs for the second time. Under the gun opens to 40. He's gonna have a narrow opening range from that position, consisting of some hands better than mine. I wanna keep his hands worse than mine in. I call, we're heads up. The flop is 9-5-3 rainbow. I check to the aggressor. He maintains that aggression, betting 70. Pretty big bet for such a dry board. I call, not exactly loving it because I'm a little confused. The turn is another 3. There are 2 clubs out there. I check. Under the gun continues with the big bets. This time it's 210. The player has about 600 in his stack. If I call here, I can't imagine folding on the river for around 400 more. A big part of me believes that I'm beat, but I just can't fold in this situation. I don't want to see any more cards. I grab a stack of black chips and announce that I don't exactly get snap called, but I do get called somewhat quickly, which means I'm likely not in good shape.
Probably had me beat.
Pick up the camera to see if I can capture the dealer putting out one of the last 2 jacks on the river to give me a full house. Instead, the river is the 10 of clubs. It's the absolute worst card in the deck because the best case scenario was that the opponent called my jam with pocket 10s or a flush draw. Those hands all have me crushed now. I turn over the jacks because he called me. I'm waiting to see him turn over the winner. Wait, why isn't he turning over his cards? What do I even beat? He gives me the nice hand pat on the table, then he throws his cards into the muck. Somehow we win a big pot and stack the opponent. I didn't think that was possible. With that hand, I'm back in the positive, and we're just getting started with the exciting hands. We do have 2 kings though, and one of them has a heart. The hijack has a short stack. He opens to 30. I 3-bet to 100 in the cutoff. The hijack calls. We're heads up. I don't know much about him other than he's a rec player. The flop comes 7-6-5 with 2 spades. The hijack checks. He only has 445 left in his stack. I want to slowly get all of it. I bet 110. The hijack calls. No real idea what I'm up against, but I imagine draws would have jammed. The turn is the jack of clubs. The hijack checks. He has 335 in his stack. I don't want to scare off ace high or 1 pair hands. I bet 150. If he somehow has a set or has me beat another way, he's going to double up because he's just really short. The hijack calls. The river is the 8 of hearts. There are 4 to the straight out there. The hijack jams for 185. This is the worst. He's just an odd dude, and I can't fold for that amount against him. I figure that I'm up against pocket 8s or pocket 9s, and I'm beat, but I congratulate the opponent before seeing what he has while making the call. The congratulations was certainly in order for the player because he turns over the old 9-5 of diamonds. I'm not sure what he was thinking pre-flop opening and then calling a 3-bet with it, but he gets a pretty great flop with bottom pair and a gutter. Then he drills the river. When that kind of thing happens, my mind breaks a little bit. I suppose that's poker, gotta move on. Several orbits later, I pick up pocket aces in the hijack. Under the gun opens at 30. Under the gun +1 is a wild player who's in for multiple buy-ins, but now only has 135 in his stack. He calls, I'm raising it up, I make it 130. Under the gun calls, under the gun +1 calls, leaving himself with $5. The flop is king 8-3 rainbow. Under the gun checks. Under the gun +1 is all in for $5. That's intimidating. I raise to 170. Under the gun folds, it's heads up. The turn is a 10. The river is a 7. Under the gun +1 reveals his cards. He has 6-3 offsuit. We have that beat. Note that this opponent is different from the player who called my 3-bet earlier with 9-5 suited. We're about to get involved in lots of hands with Mr. 6-3 offsuit since he's perpetually rebuying, so buckle up. I call my friend who's a doctor. He tells me that the remedy for that is pocket aces. That's what we have in the small blind. The hijack opens at 30. Our nemesis from the last few hands calls in the cutoff. My opponents today have not been in the mood to fold at all. For that reason, I 3-bet to 180. In a typical game, I'd make it 150, so I went larger than normal for maximum punishment. The hijack folds, cutoff calls as I expected he might. We're heads up in a large pot. The flop comes 7-3-3 rainbow. It's a dream flop because the range that I put the cutoff on consists of, I have no idea. This might actually be a terrible flop. Who knows? This guy likes to play threes. That's scary. I see bet for 150. I want to keep the player's high card hands in. That'll be drawn close to dead. The cutoff takes the bait and calls. The turn is a jack. I'm praying that he somehow has one. It's time to pump up the heat. This is the first really good situation that I've been in since before Florida. I slide in a bet at 350. I want to set up a river shove. I imagine this particular player will call if he has any pair. Sure enough, he does call. The river is a 4. Not too worried about it. I have the opponent barely covered. He has 650 in his stack. I announce that I'm not 100% sure what I'm up against, but I'm fairly certain that I want to call. The cutoff comes through and puts in a calling chip. I flip over the aces. They're put out in front of the opponent for him to see. He doesn't seem very happy. He's holding onto his cards, so I don't see what he has. We get a count for my stack. I indeed have him covered. After what seems like forever, the man finally concedes the election. I mean the hand. A massive pot is pushed in our direction. We're in for 2,900 total. We have 2,800 in front of us, so we're actually still stuck a little. Not to worry, dudes. We have pocket aces again. The same suits and everything all 3 times. The trick is that when you get them, you don't give them back to the dealer. We're in the big blind. The button raises to 30. The small blind calls. I 3-bet to 160. The button makes the call. This is not the wild player. That guy is taking a short break to go to the ATM. He'll be back though. The small blind folds. It's heads up. The dealer puts out 8-6-4 with 2 hearts. Certainly a better flop for the opponent's range than mine, but I'm going to hammer until I get raised. I bet 170. The button calls quickly. There won't be many good turns for me. The dealer puts out the king of spades. That one actually isn't bad. I would have gotten 4-bet if he had kings. I bet 350. Maybe I'm up against ace king of hearts and can stack the button. The player calls. The river is the 9 of clubs. Not a bad run out. My opponent has about 800 in the stack. Let's see if he wants to play for all of it. First, I want to show you how beautiful the Bellagio ceiling is. Wow, incredible. Now we put in enough to cover the opponent. I don't get snap called. That's always a sweat. Now I want to get called. The player's considering it. He then reluctantly lets his cards go. We're awarded all the chips that are in the middle. I was down a buy-in early on, but knew that I was in a great game, and if the cards went my way, I'd get it back. We're up to a stack of 3,500, which is a profit of 600 at the moment. Later I pick up ace-king offsuit in the small blind. Wild player opens a 30 in the cutoff. He's my favorite. The button calls. He's my second favorite. I 3-bet to 150. I actually considered flatting because against these players, you make piles of cash. Once you actually make hands and can take them to value town, you don't want to bluff them, so it's kind of better to make a pair first before inflating the pot, but not 3-betting in this instance also seems absurd. The cutoff calls, the button does not. We're heads up. The flop comes 8-6 deuce with 2 spades. Not what we hoped for, but I assume we're up against 2 random cards. Pretty sure I saw this guy get the showdown with a get out of jail free card earlier. Anyway, the point is that ace king is going to be the best hand a lot. I shouldn't have to bet too much to get worse hands to fold. I toss out 130. Of course, this guy never folds ever. He makes the call. The turn is a 10. I still think that I could be good. I've seen the player call 1-bet in hands against other players and fold quickly to bets on later streets. When it gets checked to him, he typically bets. I don't want to be in that situation. For that reason, I take the initiative, betting 250 myself. It doesn't do the trick. The player calls. Let me make a pair one time. Nope. The river is a 9. There are 4 to the straight. I can't rep one and don't want to put any more money into the pot with a guy who could easily have a strong hand or call me down with something else silly. I check. I'm not getting a showdown for free. The cutoff bet's 400. That's frustrating. I fold. I'm sure that I had him beat pre-flop and he got me again. I certainly got him for more money overall, but it's just tough to make a pair better. He leaves shortly after and then it's my turn to head out, booking a solid comeback win.